Thanks, mate. When you said I was 25 years at Kingsley College, it sounded like it took me 25 years to get through their 4 years of a bachelor's degree. Some of that time I was on the faculty, but it's great to be here with you today. What a great privilege. Talking about going and changing the world. Congratulations to the graduates. Fantastic. Congratulations to you. Well done. You're graduating and we're celebrating. And you've finished your studies and now a bright new world awaits you out there. But what are you actually graduating into? With all those hard years, those late nights, the blood, the sweat, the tears, what will it mean tomorrow? Well, I want to focus on two things. A lot of things could be said. I want to focus on two things in the next few minutes. The first one is something that has been made possible through your academic study at NTC. The world needs people who think well. It needs renewed minds who help others in the process of renewing their minds and thinking clearly. Paul says that we are to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. We are to think differently, we are to think innovatively, we are to think deeply. And your academic training has prepared you well for this. It's been said that the evangelical world is 1,000 miles wide and 1 inch deep. And you can make a difference to that because you've been trained how to think well. You've been called to be thought leaders as you graduate from this place. You know, our world is characterized by very shallow thinking, resulting in fake news and so-called alternative truth. Well, you know, that's not new. The Old Testament, the world of the Old Testament, was filled with fake news through the false prophets. One example was the alternative facts, as we might call it today, that were given to the Hebrew exiles in Babylon. Don't unpack your bags, they were told by the false prophets. You're not going to be here for very long at all. But Jeremiah had learned how to think well, to discern God's voice over the clamour of the fake news that was going on, and so he was able to speak truth to the exiles. God says through Jeremiah, I'm not sure where they got that fake news from. It sure wasn't from me. Didn't come from God. Jeremiah knew that. The truth is that they were going to be in Babylon for 70 years, and so Jeremiah has to tell them the truth. Don't unpack your bags. No, unpack your bags. Settle down, engage with the city, and pray for its well-being. Jeremiah was a good thinker. He heard God and he communicated it clearly. And this is what you've been trained to do. You can make a difference to the world, to the cities, to the neighbourhoods that you're going into. A difference that the world desperately needs. It's also very important for the integrity of the message about Jesus that you've got for the world. I read recently, if the people of God are spreading conspiracy theories and misinformation, then the world has no reason to believe us when we proclaim Jesus as Lord. This needs to be addressed. One area that we don't do very well in when it comes to thought leadership is understanding our times. It seems that the only analysis of our times that a lot of people are involved in the evangelical church results in the conclusion that we're in the last days and that Jesus is coming real soon. Well, I want to tell you, so far that hasn't happened. I hope. I'm sure you hope so too. We need a community of thinkers who know the times as the people of Issachar did. They understood the times and they knew what God required them to do. Oh, man, do we need that group. Not to hang around for the second coming, but to do all we can to see heaven come to earth now, just as Jesus commanded us to pray. On earth as in heaven. May such a tribe of thinkers develop from the class of 22, you people, and those people watching online who are graduating. You've been trained to be thought leaders. You have the potential to be double listeners, to use John Stott's term, listening well to the Bible and listening just as well to the world in which we live. Knowing then how to step out and to lead the church and the neighbourhood in the depth of thought that is needed. But there's a second thing I want to talk to you about, and it's called the order of the ordinary. It's all right, I'm only taking the gown off. This T-shirt says Order of the Ordinary for those of you who can't see it. You finished your study and now you're moving back into the world of ordinary things. You know, most of life is ordinary. A long-haul pilot once told me that flying the Pacific route was hours and hours of ordinariness, punctuated by moments of sheer terror and moments of sheer exhilaration. I didn't want to know about the sheer exhilaration, wasn't interested. But you know, it seemed like a pretty good description of life, because daily life, even pastoral work or similar ministry, has times of wonder and awe and, maybe doom and grief as well, and maybe even terror. But most of it is spent in doing ordinary things, because that's life. Welcome to the most powerful mission force, the most powerful mission order in the world, the order of the ordinary, where all of the academia, all of the great teaching that you have received will be lived out in everyday life. I think Jesus talked about this in the parables of the seeds that he gave in Mark 4. He told 3 parables about seeds in that chapter. He taught that the seeds that we plant are insignificant in size, but extraordinary in impact. He taught that we have no idea how that change from ordinary to extraordinary happens, but we just have to learn to let God do that work. And he taught that we're to sow seeds indiscriminately. We are to live lives that scatter the seeds of love and grace everywhere, every day. I think Eugene Peterson has paraphrased it well. Romans 12:1, he says, so here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing that you can do for him. So let me give you 3 examples from my own, what did that add up to be, 125 years of ministry, from my own ministry that illustrate this point. First is about a guy called Cedric. Some of you will remember Cedric well. He was a student of mine at Kingsley. He's now a Sri Lankan church leader, and he did 4 years with us at Kingsley back in the 80s. And I had him in many classes where we talked about the importance of servant leadership and the type of leadership Jesus lived and the type he called us to as his followers. And so when he sent me a message recently thanking me for teaching him about being a servant, I was encouraged as I thought about all those classes being worth it. He then went on to tell me the story that illustrated his learning from me. He told me that when he first came to the college, he noticed that I was doing the dishes at a college dinner. And he thought that if the principal could do the dishes, then he could too. And he told me he still makes a point of doing the dishes. I'm sure his wife Charlene is very happy about that. And has taught his sons the importance of dishes and servant leadership. And one of his sons was just ordained in the Wesleyan Church in New Zealand over this last weekend, and I'm sure he's brought that servant leadership into that context. But this story from Cedric reminded me how important our example is, and that if we don't live what we're teaching, the life application won't happen. Seeds sown in ordinary ways, but God did something wonderful with it. The second story is about another student, not in the Wesleyan Church, but a student from Kingsley by the name of Martin. He was being commissioned to a local church for a pastoral role, and he asked me if I would preach at the service. I was thrilled to have that privilege and prepared with that importance in mind. I wanted this to be special, as I thought very highly of Martin. I preached my heart out. As a part of the service, Martin led the church in prayer, and as he was walking back past me off the stage, I grabbed his arm and I told him I thought he did really well. Years later, he and I were in a small group together, and he commented on how I had encouraged him so much at the commissioning service. You see what's happening, don't you? How much I encouraged him at the commissioning service, and my mind went to the impassioned sermon that I had prepared and preached. But then I listened to the story that he was telling the others in the group about my arm grab and encouraging words. And he said it made him feel like everything was going to be okay. I listened to that and I asked him if he remembered what I'd preached on. And he said, "Did you preach that day?" And then he said, "Oh yeah, you did too." He's actually a nice guy. But that arm grab and those words just meant so much to me, mate. Seeds sown, small seeds in the everydayness of life. And God takes them and does extraordinary things with them. Last story, Peter. He wanted to know if Jesus really makes a difference in people's lives. He used to come to a coffee shop that my wife Debbie and I ran in the 1970s, and he was a bit of a wild man from the streets in those days, and we loved him to bits, and he started following Jesus as I prayed with him on the shop floor of a printing works that he ran. He was the real deal, and he had found Jesus to be the real deal too. Pete and I are still friends today, over 45 years later, and he still loves Jesus. And he told me recently that he used to watch Debbie and me to see if we were different. He said he noticed how we treated each other with respect and clearly loved one another, qualities he hadn't seen in other relationships that he was familiar with. He thought that if Deb and I were just like everyone else that he knew in relationships, then he would know that Jesus didn't make any difference at all. But he saw a difference, and it was this that caused him to give Jesus a go and to see what he could do with his life. You see, people are watching. They're watching how you treat your partner, how you treat your children, how you treat the people who don't like you, and there will be a few. They're watching. And if they see the love of Jesus shining through in your everyday life with other people, especially with those who are closest to you, they may conclude that Jesus is the real deal and that he really does make a difference. Planting seeds, it really does make a difference. And God does some wonderful things with them. And so, to you graduands, congratulations. It's fantastic. It's fantastic to get to this point and to be able to put your gown back on. There it is. You're a group of people who can change the world. You can be thought leaders who think deeply and critically and analytically and who ask great questions and listen to all of the answers and discern what is right and be wise in the application of those thoughts. That's you. You can do that. You can do that because you've been well trained by some of the best minds Australia has to offer. How fortunate are you? How fortunate is the neighbourhood, the church, the world that you will engage with over the coming years. And and you can change the world because you are committed to planting seeds in your everyday life as a part of the order of the ordinary. You get up, you go to work, ordinary lives. Seeds of love and encouragement and kindness and mercy. And you'll change the world because you know that no matter how good your preaching is, or how impactful your teaching might be, that the real key to making a difference is in sowing seeds of faithful love. To love Jesus and to love the world as Jesus loves the world. Go get 'em, graduands.